Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Myself is Mavis James. I am the host and research associate at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. We are pleased to have a great people together with us today. I would like to tell you briefly about the SARIM. In this growing era of hatred and intolerance, SARIM emerged as an organization having a vision based on the defending the rights of minorities of South Asia. We at Sarim believe in mutual respect among all religions. Sarim serves as a platform for social activists and individuals from within minorities and indigenous communities to engage their creative spirit and drive innovative solutions to the challenges that they are facing. And it should be taken into account to eradicate such attitudes that demonize minorities and foster division. So, we will be talking on the socio-political victimization of South Asian minorities, a major consequence of hate speech. As we all aware that South Asia has experienced a heightened incidence of hate speech and incitement to hatred with grave consequences for its minorities, religious, ethnic, linguistic or indigenous related. So, we would like to know your thoughts and experience regarding this issue and your perspective. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to speak on the topic. So, firstly, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Sabir Michael, who belongs to Pakistan. He is an educationist, social worker, researcher, and human rights defender. He holds a PhD degree in sociology from the University of Karachi. Hearty welcome to the Sarim, Dr. Sabir Michael. Please proceed now.
First of all, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum, good evening, namaste, sat sri akal to everyone across the South Asia and the world, wherever this session is being heard or being attended by the researchers, participants, and human rights activists. Secondly, I would like to thank you very much to the South Asia Research Institute for Minorities for inviting me and also for hosting this event and for their continuous efforts to strive for the protection and promotion of the rights of the minority communities, especially in South Asia. I would also like to appreciate your research efforts, your activism, because it is much needed than the past. I would like to just share something about me that as she introduced myself, I am a Karachi-based academician and human rights activist, having a master's degree in social work and PhD in sociology, and I am associated as an assistant professor at the Department of Social Work, University of Karachi. Apart from that, I am associated with Bahria University, teaching business sociology and human rights, and also to the couple of law universities in the town, and teaching human rights in the sociological background. I have a working experience of spending time in United Nations in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and it was very nice experience in 2009 while I was working at Zavis Zulfikar Ali Bhutto Institute of Technology. But this is my academic side. The human rights side, I work for a couple of organizations as a consultant, as an advisor, National Lobbying Delegation for Minority Rights, a project of Community World Service Asia, and also I run an organization, Peace, Welfare and Development Association, which is basically an organization with a cross-cutting theme to work for the rights of the vulnerable communities, which are non-dominant and which are dependent on someone, including religious minorities, persons with disabilities, and the senior citizens, women and children. The reason is that being a blind and being a member of the minority community in Pakistan, I have faced discrimination. I am facing discrimination, sometimes persecution, and that's motivated me to work for the rights of the minorities. Coming back to the topic of today, uh, in South Asia, I would rather focus on Pakistan and India, and also a little bit on Sri Lanka, because in these three countries, the minorities who are non-dominant, who are facing the problems, they are not only facing socio-economic and cultural problems, but they are also facing the political repercussions of all these problems that they are facing. If I look at in Pakistan, I would like to go by country. If we go in Pakistan, we see that the minorities in Pakistan, their situation has been deteriorating since its inception. But unfortunately, due to the geopolitical situation, due to geo-economic situations of the country, the situation for the minority is becoming too hard to live even. Um, they are under threat. They are non-dominant. They have to face violence not only from their community members uh, but also from the state institution. Sometimes when I say the state institution, I know it's a big thing what I'm saying, but it means that when your constitution say that the minorities cannot become the president, the prime minister, the chief of army staff, the chief of the judiciary, that's mean you classify them as a second class citizen. So when this institutionalized discrimination exists in the state policy, it ultimately reflects in the societies, in a communal codes, in a different kind of all spheres of life where the people interact in society as a member of the society to interact and to interface their different social, economic, cultural, and political needs. Um, the forced conversion is a major crisis of the Christian, Hindu, and Sikh community of Pakistan, which is a visible minority in the society. At the same time, the Ahmadi community, they are also facing the problems. They are also on a cutting edge, but their problem is something of religious nature. That's why I would restrain myself a little bit talking about them. But I do admit that their life is also very strange, very difficult, on a brink of uh, juncture of their identity. So the first of all, all the minorities have to face the identity crisis because the Christians of Pakistan are identical with the Western countries because of their religious identity. So as the Hindu are considered uh, or attributed always with the Hindu community of India because of their religious uh, similarity. So that's make the majority people to think about them as a traitor sometimes, or they suspect their loyalty, although they do their best to provide maximum social support to the society to give back, but they have to face the discrimination, sometimes persecution. So forced conversion, the religious communities, especially Christian and Hindus, they have to face. And in the context of the religious discrimination or forced conversion, the girls, especially the underage girls, are converted to Islam and then married, and it really has created resentment among the minority people. As a human rights activist, I never mind the conversion of a religion, but when it is forced conversion, when it is especially with the underage girls, it is no way acceptable in the society, and we are fighting and we will fight against it. Unfortunately, the state has done two efforts to pass the bill of anti-forced conversion bill, so forced conversion bill to stop and to address the grievances of the government. But unfortunately, the vast majority of the parliamentarians, of the extremist groups and socio-political organizations, they have stopped it and they have not let it pass. And that we knew already that this law is not going to be passed by the assembly. But what has happened that it has exposed the government of Pakistan, the establishment, it has exposed their weakness, and so as the dual standard of the political parties of the Pakistan. And they normally say when we meet them in a lobbying that we are with you, but publicly they are not ready to accept it and to do the legislation for that. We have so many cases in which the vulnerable girls, the poor girls, they are being, first they are abducted, then married, and in order to cover their abduction, crimes of abduction and marriage, they are shown that they have embraced Islam. A very informal certificate of any madrasa is presented, and when they are Muslim, nobody can say anything because the state law says that anything which belongs to Sharia cannot be challenged, even if it is a anti-constitution. So the point is that I personally feel that practically, it seems to me that the Sharia law is in place in Pakistan. On the on the contrary, it is said that we have constitution. But when you say that even the Sharia law would prevail over the constitution, that's mean there is a Sharia law prevailing in the country. The second problem the minorities are facing that they are uh, socioeconomically very poor, and the government has initiated a very little for them in terms of socioeconomic policies and practices. At the same time, the minorities in Pakistan, they are politically victimized in the sense of weakest, in the sense that the representation system for the minorities in Pakistan is proportionate electoral system, according to which there are 10 seats for the members of the minorities, all the minorities, and these members are nominated by or reserved by the um, political parties, and the political parties choose their own blue eyes, which works not for the minorities in the parliament. They work to satisfy or to make happy to their political bosses. So they have no connection with the people, they have no aspiration of the people, and unfortunately sometimes they are forced to work for their political bosses or the establishment and others, because they have nothing in their hands. Another problem I would like to highlight, that we have a problem of statistics. Uh, uh, the number of the minorities has been shown very less than the past, and we are surprised that at the one time when the population of the Christian and the Pakistan is increasing, at the same time the how the population of the minorities, especially Christian and Hindus, is decreasing. We are the same people, we have the same social setup, same social behavior regarding the family, sexuality, reproduction, and everything. How it has happened that our population has gone down? So we have a serious reservation over the new statistics of the census of 2017, and we really demand that it should be reviewed, and independent census should be done, which should be acceptable for all. So the issues are too many, but I would like to here switch over to the India, where I follow, and I have been specially following the problems facing the Christian community in India, and also by the Muslim community. We have seen the lynching of the Muslim fellows, the Christian missionaries, and over the period of last 8 or 10 years, uh, since the Modi regime is there, and which it is very unfortunate that the Modi regime is there, and they are really destroying not only the image of India, they are destroying the humanity in India, because India used to be claiming that they are the secular state, but unfortunately they have distorted their face of the secular India. Now, we have seen that the Muslim people were killed because of having a cows cut for their own use and for their religious ceremonies. Even the old people who have nothing to do with anything, they were killed and lynched. Similarly, the Christian missionaries, as I said, it is really really important that the world should have taken a great notice of it, even at the stages of the United Nations. But unfortunately, their issues were not addressed as much as they should have been, because I understand that the world has economic interest with Indian regime, with Indian trade, and they normally do not adopt strong stance as they adopt against Pakistan. And I would not say this is only the West. Also, the Islamic countries, they are also with India. They are more than the Pakistan, and because of their economic interest, perhaps they are forced to do so. Similarly, I would like to here mention the problem of facing the farmers in India, because they are also being targeted by this regime, and their interests are on stake, and they are raising protests since last year, but nobody is hearing them. And unfortunately, we have seen some campaigns from some international stabilities, but international governments who are not speaking for their rights, because the farmers are minorities in the sense, by profession they are underdogs, and they need some kind of attention. Similarly, the women, especially belonging to minorities, they have been facing the rape, the cruelties, and discrimination, and they have been facing harassment and all these in India, which must be stopped there. And I would like to move to the Sri Lanka, because in Sri Lanka we have seen the after Easter attacks, the many Muslims were attacked, many mosques were attacked, which is not acceptable at all. Although I am a Christian, and I was really shocked and even some I'm angry over this issue. But since we also felt very bad when some people tried to disturb the Muslim community of the Sri Lanka, because we see every human being, every citizen, a member of a universal human society. So it was very, very difficult. Similarly, sometimes the Tamil communities, they are facing the discrimination from the Sindhali communities in Sri Lanka. Although situation is becoming a little better since the LTT has gone and the other some arrangements are being made, but this is very important. Similarly, in India, in Sri Lanka and India, uh, there has been high and cry over the more political participation of the Muslim and other communities in Sri Lanka and both in India. We see in Nepal also the Christians are facing persecution. The religion, the conversion of the religion, the government has trying to stop it because they are also trying to work closely, I guess, to the Modi regime. Even in India, here I would like to mention, which I skipped by chance, that the anti-citizen law, which deprived the rights of the Muslim community, and which really created resentment. And the Muslim communities, and especially the women, came up and they raised the slogans. They did a demonstration on a large scale to stop these kind of violence and these kind of anti-human laws. I would say that the Anti-Citizen Act, the Citizenship Act, which was depriving the political and citizen rights of the Muslim community, is not acceptable in this 21st century. How India can claim to be a member of a Security Council when they are at the same time passing such a brutal and black laws? In Nepal, as I was talking to you, the Christian pastors have been arrested. They have been stopped uh, uh, to profess and practice their religion, even to manifest their religion, which is their fundamental rights in the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. So in Bangladesh, we have seen so many problems with the ethnic Urdu-speaking minorities. They are being subjugated. They are not giving their due rights in their jobs and in different kind of all kind of social spheres. They are being kept backward. And similarly, the Rohingya Muslims who came from Bangladesh as a minority, as a refugee, they are also facing problems. They are also disturbed, and the different kind of groups in Bangladesh, they are not, they are, rather than supporting, instead they are disturbing these Rohingya Muslims who need support. And it was very shocking to know, even yesterday, that one of the leader of the Rohingya Muslims in Bangladesh, he was killed. And it shows that the violence is increasing against the Rohingya Muslims. Their socio-economic, they were forced to live in camps where their social and economic life is very, very disturbed. They are in danger. Their identity is in danger. Although they were facing or at the one hand, they were facing so many problems in their own country. But when they came as a refugee, they faced very serious and heinous crimes over in Bangladesh, which was really shocking, which was surprising, and which was anti-human, and which must be stopped at all. I would here like to mention some good practices of the government of Pakistan, because everything is not bad. All of course there are some good people around the world, around the countries, around in the country, in the government which works for them. Like the government of Pakistan had introduced a 2%, 5% minority quota for minorities, although it is not being implemented properly. And to establish that, I would like to remind you the statement of the Chief Justice of Pakistan given yesterday, that the 30,000 seats jobs for the minorities are still vacant and they are not being filled. And why they are not being filled? Since I'm involved in lobbying right from the beginning, from top to bottom and bottom to top, nobody wants to give them job. Actually, they want to keep them away. Nobody trusts them, neither in a political positions nor in a higher position. Like, I would like to see someone Christian foreign minister of Pakistan. I would like to see someone Hindu interior minister of Pakistan. Why the very few ministers are given just a post of a minister for human rights or minority affairs. That's mean our loyalty is challenged. But anyway, at the same time, the government also uh, is trying uh, to pass the education quota for minorities on the demand or the constant lobbying of the civil society groups working for the minorities. And in the government of Punjab province, they have announced already 2%. Although there is need to reform and refresh these notifications or these steps, but at least we have seen some steps towards the positive direction. But where there are some steps, also there are the opposition is growing because the political groups, uh, or especially the religious political groups, they raise their issues to attract their voters, to increase their vote bank, which is very serious thing in society. So we and politically, minorities in Pakistan are becoming very weak. They have nothing to say in the politics. Universal Declaration of the Human Rights, sorry, Universal Declaration for the Minority Rights, passed in 1992, of which we are celebrating almost these days of the its celebrations. Its point says that point 8 or I think 7 says that the minorities should be given due right in the policy decision making of their policy matters. But we believe that in different kind of policy matters, the stake of the minority communities is not considered. You know, in Pakistan, every bill which is passed from the assembly, it is sent to the Common Council of Islamic Ideology in order to see that it is according to Islam. Then it is sent to the Women Rights Commission and other relevant stakeholders to see with the gender lens and with other human rights lenses. But the minority interest is not at all considered in any kind of legislation. And most importantly, in Pakistan, the minority seats in 1994 were 10 in the National Assembly. And now, even in 2021, when the assembly's membership or the seats have been increased from 272 to 342 direct election seats, even now, their seats are still there. So, as I mentioned, uh, the minorities, although there are good sides, but overall the situation for the minority is decreasing, not only in Pakistan but in South Asia, because they are socio-economically poor, they are under marginalized, their education standard is very poor, and at the same time, I would like to say their religious and political leadership is sometimes not able to play their role, and most of the time, whatever they can do, they are not doing so because they work, as I said, that to satisfy and to make happy their political bosses. So I think if I think that I have consumed my time, but I would be open for the question at the end of the session or any question or comment. But I would like to say that uh, minority rights have not been able to become a national agenda. The South Asia. The minorities in South Asia, and especially in Pakistan, uh, they are facing serious disadvantages in terms of their political participation and political standing and political visibility. Politics is the only source where you can uh, try to find some guarantees of your identity, your social, economic, and cultural rights. But unfortunately, it is very much disturbing that the regimes that comes through so-called democratic system, when they come into the power, they try to delegitimize and try to defame these religious minorities, especially somewhere ethnic minorities and somewhere linguistic minorities. uh, it is very imperative to note that the minority agenda of the minorities has not been accepted and adopted or acknowledged as a national agenda. In order to satisfy the needs of the national human rights institutions, United Nations, and other human rights mechanisms, human rights in general is spoken, but the minority rights are not given a due importance in a national agenda, national legislation, and in other programs and plans of the states. Uh, wherever the minorities are facing the problems, it is I think very difficult for them to survive. Now the struggle for survival is increasing. Uh, is becoming very very difficult for the non-dominant groups like minorities, whatever their nature is, national, economic, social, or gender wise, or so on and so forth. But the situation is becoming very very serious, and um, we what we should do now, we should always try to strike the agenda of minorities in a limelight. The more we will speak, the more in the future we will try to get the place in a national legislations, international legislations, or international and national policy frameworks. We must uh, keep on talking about minority rights. We must keep on the atrocities and persecution and discrimination, whatever degree is, to highlight it so that it might be registered nationally, locally, and internationally. Of course, we also should try to focus our constitutions through the political lobbying and advocacy. We should also um, try to encourage the political parties to mainstream, to include the minority people in their mainstream politics, their political activities, their political policy making institutions, and especially when they are in government, in the normal run of normal affairs of the state. As I was saying in the beginning, I don't know my voice could heard about that, or I was not cut. I was saying that in Pakistan, let's say, why the minority person cannot be the foreign minister, the defense minister, and the interior minister. When it is not, I understand that perhaps the loyalty of these minorities is suspected. And this suspicion is not very much acceptable. And this creates a sense of isolation and alienation among the minorities. When you include the minorities in your political systems, in your legislation process, and you give them due importance and visibility, the other people of the majority, wherever country, whatever country is, they understand that yes, these minorities are integral and obligatory part of this society. When the state itself ignore them, when the political parties ignore them, the normal people, they also reject them. They do not count them. So there is a great need that the minorities must be counted for socially, economically, and politically. If it is done, then they will be accepted in a culture also. And it is very important that they must be allowed to uh, act upon their religious freedom. They must not be made hostage by any state or non-state actors. Sometimes we see in Pakistan now the government was trying to pass a bill, a forced conversion law, and unfortunately the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, they threatened the government of Pakistan. If you do so, they would fight against it. Who they are? Yes, in Pakistan, the National Assembly did not pass it. The committee of the National Assembly rejected this bill. Don't worry, it's a political process. But how can made they make the government hostage? And we know that when these kind of groups come over, everyone goes back for the protection of their life, for the protection of the life of their families. I am going to appreciate the presentation or the discussion by our Indian friend, and it was a very balanced speech also. And again, I would thank uh, this institute or association for organizing this program and inviting me in this program. And welcome for any question and query. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your valuable thoughts, and we really appreciate your effort throughout your life. That is tremendous, and you are blessed by the God. I would like to invite Ikra. Please proceed now.
Welcome and good evening, everyone. I am Ikra and I'm the co host of today's webinar. Now, I would like to invite our next speaker of the webinar, who is a human rights activist and journalist, Zakir Ali Tyagi. He writes articles for NewsClick, Youth की परवास, and two circles belong to UP, India. Over to you, Zakir Ali.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आज हम बात कर रहे हैं जो है माइनॉरिटी पर जो है जो या ह्यूमन राइट्स की या माइनॉरिटीज पर जो है जो जुल्म और सितम का जो है कारवां बढ़ता जा रहा है उसकी जहां मैं बात करूं, अगर आपने मुझे एज ए इंडियन यहाँ पर बुलाया है तो मैं आपके सामने रखूं कि इंडिया में मात्र मोदी सरकार में, नरेंद्र मोदी जी की गवर्नमेंट में, इनके प्राइम मिनिस्टर रहते हुए इंडिया में यानी कि 6 साल के बीच में 5,992 लोगों पर यूएपीए दर्ज किया गया है। और वो यूएपीए यानी कि अनलॉफुल प्रिवेंशन एक्टिविटीज एक्ट, जो आतंकवादियों पर, टेररिस्ट लोगों पर लगाया जाता है। और वो यूएपीए सिर्फ उन्हीं लोगों पर लगा है, या तो वो मुस्लिम है या फिर मुस्लिम को जो है रिप्रेजेंटेट करते हैं, या फिर उस गैर मुस्लिम पर लगा है, उस हिंदू पर लगा है जो मुस्लिमों के हक में जो है आवाज उठाने की कोशिश करता है। इंडिया में एक स्टेट है उत्तर प्रदेश, जिसके चीफ मिनिस्टर योगी आदित्यनाथ हैं, और उसमें लगभग 6,800 लोगों के एनकाउंटर हो चुके हैं। हर मुल्क में मुझे लगता है कि एनएचआरसी होता है, नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन होता है, लेकिन बावजूद उसके भी नागरिकों के, यहाँ पर मैं बात जो है माइनॉरिटीज की ही नहीं कर रहा हूँ, हर कम्युनिटी कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि इंडिया में एक सच्चर कमेटी की एक रिपोर्ट्स आई थी, सच्चर कमीशन का एक रिपोर्ट आया था जिसमें कहा गया था कि आज के इंडिया में मुस्लिमों का हालत दलितों से भी बदतर है। लेकिन आप यकीन कीजिएगा, अगर आप यकीन कीजिएगा कि दलितों से जो बदतर हालात है मुस्लिमों के, वो शिक्षा के मामले में है, एजुकेशन के मामले में। लेकिन अगर जुल्म की बात की जाए तो इंडिया में आज भी सबसे ज्यादा जो जुल्म होता है वो कास्टिज्म को लेकर दलित कम्युनिटी पर होता है। उनको आज अगर वो पानी लेना चाहते हैं, वाटर लेना चाहते हैं कुओं से, तो उनको लाइन में लगना पड़ता है। और उनके कोई बड़ा लीडर्स जो है उनके घर का खाना खाना नहीं पसंद करता है, क्योंकि वो नीची कास्ट से आते हैं। और उनको मोब लिंचिंग का शिकार जो है बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से होना पड़ता है। और उनको यहाँ तक कि टेम्पल्स में जो है एंट्री तक नहीं दी जाती है। क्यों? क्योंकि वो दलित है। माइनॉरिटीज जो है इंडिया में मुस्लिम है और दलित है। तो यहाँ पर मैं सभी की बात कर रहा हूँ, जैसे कि पाकिस्तान में हिंदूज है, वो माइनॉरिटीज में आते हैं। लेकिन मैं फिर भी देखता हूँ तो खुशी होती है कि माइनॉरिटीज का जहाँ आप लोग बहुत अच्छे से जो है ख्याल रख पा रहे हैं। किसी मंदिर पर वहां पर हमला हुआ तो वहां की कुछ सरकार ने, सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने आदेश दिया सरकार को कि इस मंदिर को बनाया जाए, इस टेम्पल को बनाया जाए, और जो माइनॉरिटीज है उसकी आस्था का ख्याल रखा जाए। लेकिन हमारे यहाँ जो बाबरी मस्जिद को शहीद किया गया था, आज या तो वो किसी कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंसी से लोकसभा के मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट हुआ करते हैं, या फिर वो किसी राज्य के चीफ मिनिस्टर हुआ करते हैं, या फिर कोई, मतलब हर तरीके से वो किसी न किसी रूलिंग पार्टी का हिस्सा है, उनकी ताजपोशी की गई है। तो मैं शुक्रगुजार हूँ आप लोगों का कि आप लोग हमारे जो माइनॉरिटीज है अपने मुल्क में, उनका आप ख्याल रख पा रहे हैं, उनकी आस्था का ख्याल रख पा रहे हैं। और हम सबको मिलकर जो है एकजुट होकर यूनिटी के साथ लड़ना है ना, चाहे वो किसी के भी ह्यूमन राइट्स का वायलेशन हो, उस पर आवाज उठानी है, आवाज को बुलंद करना है, चाहे सत्ता, क्योंकि सत्ता कोई भी रही हो। ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर आज इंडिया में कोई मुस्लिम प्राइम मिनिस्टर बन जाए तो वो मुस्लिमों के हालातों को सुधार सकता है। क्यों? क्योंकि अगर कोई लीडर अपनी कास्ट के या अपनी कम्युनिटी के हालात सुधार पाता, तो इंडिया में जो इस वक्त प्रेसिडेंट है वो दलित समाज से आते हैं, दलित समाज से आते हैं, दलित कम्युनिटी से आते हैं। लेकिन उसके बाद भी दलितों पर बेइंतहा जो है जुल्म और सितम जो है जारी है। इसी तरीके से राष्ट्रपति यहाँ पर एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम भी रह कर गए, लेकिन उस दौर में जो आतंकवाद के केस में, टेररिज्म के केस में सबसे ज्यादा जो जेल में गए थे वो कांग्रेस की सरकार में ने जो है मुस्लिमों को डालने का काम किया था। बीजेपी की सरकार आई तो अब वो लोग 20 साल बाद, 23 साल बाद जम्मू कश्मीर के लोग जो है जेलों से रिलीज हो रहे हैं। वो सब वो लोग रिलीज हो रहे हैं जो कांग्रेस जब यहाँ पर सत्ता हो, रूलिंग पार्टी में हुआ करती थी, सत्ता में हुआ करती थी, पावर में हुआ करती थी, जिसके प्राइम मिनिस्टर मनमोहन सिंह हुआ करते थे। उनके जमाने में जो मुस्लिम समाज के लोग जो है टेररिज्म के नाम पर जेल में डाले जाते थे, वो इस वक्त जो है रिलीज हो रहे हैं। शुक्रिया। मैं कुछ आगे बोलूंगा, लेकिन फिलहाल मैं कुछ लोगों को सुनना चाहता हूँ। इस पर इंडिया में शेडिशन चल रहा है, और वो शेडिशन 17.5 साल उम्र थी मेरी जिस वक्त मैं 42 डेज के लिए जेल में रहा। और जेल में मैं सिर्फ इसलिए रहा क्योंकि योगी आदित्यनाथ जो उत्तर प्रदेश के चीफ मिनिस्टर हुआ करते हैं, उन्होंने ओथ लेते ही एक स्पीच दिया था जिसमें उन्होंने कहा था कि गुंडे बदमाश यूपी को छोड़कर चले जाएं। अगर उन्होंने उत्तर प्रदेश नहीं छोड़ा तो उनका एनकाउंटर कर दूंगा, या फिर उनको मार दूंगा, या फिर वहां भेज दूंगा जहां पर वो नहीं जाना चाहेंगे। यानी सीधी सीधी क्रिमिनल्स लोगों को धमकी दी थी चीफ मिनिस्टर ने ओथ लेते ही, कि या तो उत्तर प्रदेश को छोड़ दीजिए, मेरे स्टेट को छोड़ दीजिए, वरना आपको एनकाउंटर में मार दूंगा। तो उस पर मैंने एक सोशल मीडिया पर पोस्ट लिखा था कि योगी जी यहाँ पर भी 28 मुकदमे दर्ज हैं, जिसमें 22 बहुत ही सीरियस हैं। तो उस बात के लिए मुझ पर उत्तर प्रदेश की गवर्नमेंट ने सेडिशन का केस लगा, 42 डेज तक जेल में रखा। और उसके बाद मुझ पर अभी 2020 में एनआरसी और सीए के अगेंस्ट प्रोटेस्ट करने की वजह से काउ स्लॉटरिंग का केस भी मेरे अगेंस्ट जो है फेक केस बनाकर जो मुझको जेल में रखा गया।
I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much, Zakir Ali. Now I would like to invite Ali Zaidi. He is an advocate in Supreme Court of India and minority rights activist. Currently, he is documenting Assam violence, Gujarat custodial and death cases of minorities.
Tell you the main thing is that we are facing on our ground. Firstly, I would like to thank you all of you for this webinar. Actually, I would like to start from the beginning. Filhal, we are in condition. I would like to rather speak in Hindi rather than English so that all of you can understand me. The thing is that if हम लोग इस फिलहाल इस दौर में जी रहे हैं जहाँ पे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की किताबों को साइड रख के पॉलिटिकल एजेंडास की किताबों को आगे कर दिया गया। वी आर इन अ माइनॉरिटी इन इंडिया, और जहां भी अभी साउथ एशिया में जहां भी माइनॉरिटीज हैं, वो ज्यादातर जो फियरलेस और जो फियर में जी रही है, उसका ज्यादातर सबसे ज्यादा जो मेरे हिसाब से जो लगता है उसकी जो वजह है वो पॉलिटिकल एजेंडास है। वो पोलराइजेशन चाह रहे हैं। दैट्स ओनली जस्ट लाइक आई एम फेसिंग इन इंडिया। वो लोग पोलराइजेशन चाह रहे हैं और उसी वजह से ये सारा एजेंडास जो है चीजें चल रही हैं। हेट स्पीच, मैं 3 साल से, पिछले आपको इंट्रोड्यूस भी कर दूं, 3-4 साल से मैं एक्टिविज्म में हूँ। मैंने बहुत सारे केसेस देखे हैं जहाँ पे कहीं ना कहीं अगर एक मुसलमान या एक माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटी का बंदा कोई प्रोपोगेशन अपना इस्लाम का भी कर देता है तो उस पर यूएपीए लग जाता है, उस पर सेडिशन लग जाता है। और जहाँ देश के कैपिटल में बड़े बड़े नारे लगाए जाते हैं कि इनको काटा जाए और इनको मारा जाए, तो वहां उनको 12 घंटे के अंदर जमानत मिल जाती है। तो वी बिलीव इन दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग हियर इन इंडिया, दैट वी आर facing a discrimination by the laws, by the judiciary, even by the government, by the administration. हर तरफ से ना सुकून है ना ही कुछ है, बस जिए जा रहे हैं और इस तरह से जिए जा रहे हैं कि सिर्फ एक होप है कि जो जिस डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री में हम जी रहे हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं डेमोक्रेसी का और कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की किताबों का, लॉस की किताबों का पालन करेगी और हमारे लिए कहीं ना कहीं से चीजें निकल के आएंगी। वी बिलीव ऑल इन अ होप। जाकिर ने आपको बता ही दिया होगा। असम में फिलहाल की मैं प्रेजेंट की कंडीशन आपको बता देता हूँ। असम में अभी इंडिया में एक इंसिडेंट हुआ जहां निहत्थे लोगों पे गोलियां चलाई गई। वहां की अपडेट अभी फिलहाल ये है कि आप ये समझिए कि 23 तारीख का वो इंसिडेंट था, आज 30 तारीख हो गई है, 7 दिन हो चुके हैं। जिन लोगों की गोलियां लगी हुई हैं वो अस्पताल में बिना इलाज के गोलियां खाए बैठे हैं। देयर इज नो वन इन द हॉस्पिटल जो उनकी गोलियां निकाल दे, उनको ऑपरेट कर दे। तो यहाँ डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री और डेमोक्रेसी का ये हाल हो चुका है जो जिसको हम फेस कर रहे हैं। मैंने मेरठ में केसेस देखे, मेरठ में बहुत सारी चीजें ऐसी थी और अब असम में भी वो सब चीजें निकल के आ रही हैं कि बहुत लोग ऐसे हैं जो गोलियां खाए हुए अपने घरों में बैठे हैं। उनको डर है कि कहीं अगर सरकार को पता लगा कि हम लोग उनमें इन्वॉल्व थे, हम उस पत्थरबाजी में या जो वायलेंस क्लैश क्रिएट हुआ हम उसमें इन्वॉल्व थे, हमारे घरों में आग लगाई जाएगी, हमारे बच्चों को भी आने वाले वक्त की जो नस्लें होंगी उनको भी एक स्टेटस के साथ जेलों में भर दिया जाएगा कि ये लोग आतंकवादी हैं। तो हम पे क्वेश्चन उठाना बहुत ज्यादा आसान है। हर जगह से जो हालात हैं, गुजरात का आप केस देख लें। अभी फिलहाल के मैं कुछ केसेस जो मैंने लीड किए हैं वो आपको बता देता हूँ। गुजरात में एक बच्चे को उठा लिया गया मास्क के नाम पे, गौरक्षा के मास्क के नाम पे, एक कैंपेनिंग के नाम पे उसको उठा लिया गया, जो आज के टाइम में बहुत आसान है। आप अपने घर में कुछ भी बनाए वो आपका डेमोक्रेटिक राइट नहीं बचा है फिलहाल। अगर आपका पड़ोसी आपकी कंप्लेन कर देता तो आप समझिए आपको बचाने के लिए पूरी आपकी अल्लाह से दुआ मांगनी पड़ेगी और पूरी अपनी कुव्वत और खानदान की कुव्वत लगानी पड़ जाएगी। जहां एक बच्चे को कस्टडी में ले जाया गया, अब उसको इतना टॉर्चर किया गया, पुलिस के अकॉर्डिंग से सुसाइड कर लिया। सुसाइड की कंडीशन ये है कि जहां जिस जगह पे उसने लटक के सुसाइड किया और बच्चे की हाइट जो है वो 6 फुट 3 इंच है, और जहां पुलिस सिनेरियो दे रही है कि इसने यहाँ इस आप समझिए तार पे या इस लोहे के फाते पे लटक के सुसाइड किया, उसकी हाइट जो है 5 फुट 8 इंच है, तो बैठ के सुसाइड करे जा रहा है मुसलमान और चीजें देखी जा रही है। वहां एक स्टोरी क्रिएट कर दी गई है, एफआईआर लॉन्च होने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में और आईपीसी की किताबों में बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जो हमने पढ़ी थी स्कूल टाइम पे या कॉलेज टाइम पे, हमने बहुत सारी चीजें देखी थी कि हम अगर पुलिस एफआईआर नहीं करती है तो उनको भी 6 महीने की सजा हो सकती है। मगर फिलहाल कंडीशन ये है कि वकील को भेजा जाता है तो उसको डराया धमकाया जाता है। जाकिर भाई एक्टिविस्ट हैं इंडिया में, इनको बहुत अच्छे से चीजों का पता है। इवन मेरी 2 बार गाड़ियों पे गोली चली, गाड़ी तोड़ी गई, घर पे हमले हुए, अगर आप आवाज भी उठाएंगे तो उसको भी आप इस तरह से दबाया जाएगा। दूसरी तरफ एक कंडीशन और है यहाँ पे, वो ये है नाम कमाने की। यहाँ बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जो रियलिटी में आप लोग हैं इंटरनेशनल फोरम में, तो आज मैं चीजें दर्द में बयान कर रहा हूँ और आपको हकीकत भी बता देता हूँ। हु हैव द फेस कि हम वो लोगों की मदद कर रहे हैं, बट द रियलिटी इज दैट कि दे आर ओनली फॉर द फोटो शूट। वो आते हैं कुछ लोग जो फोटो खिंचा के चले जाते हैं। इवन जस्ट लाइक एज इन आसाम, आसाम में कुछ लोग आप देखें इस टाइम वहां जाकिर अली त्यागी का और मेरा जाने का प्लान था, अभी भी मेरा चल रहा है। वहां हम लोग सिर्फ इसलिए नहीं गए क्योंकि वहां पे एक होड़ लगी है फोटो खिंचाने की उन विक्टिम्स के साथ, और उन विक्टिम्स को ये नहीं पूछा जा रहा है कि आपके साथ सिर्फ ये एक डायरी लेके और कैमरा लेके वहां लोग पहुंच चुके हैं कि हम आपकी मदद करेंगे और सब कुछ करेंगे। और अंदाजा ये लगाइए कि गुवाहाटी में बराबर में ही जिन लोगों की गोलियां लगी हुई है वो अस्पताल में लेटे हैं, वहां को डॉक्टर उन्हें पूछने वाला नहीं है। आज बड़ी मुश्किल से वहां कुछ लोग, नदीम भाई वगैरह लोग पहुंचे, वहां एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में बात करी, 3 लोगों का ऑपरेशन आज कराया, 3 लोगों को बाद में ऑपरेट कराएंगे। और अभी गिनती उन लोगों की पता नहीं है, क्योंकि आप अगर वीडियो देखेंगे तो बेइंतहा तरीके से अननंबर्ड शूटिंग की जा रही थी, गोलियां इतनी चल रही थी कि वीडियो रिकॉर्ड अगर आप देखेंगे तो आप गिन नहीं पाएंगे। तो कितने लोगों को गोलियां लगी हुई हैं उसका भी अंदाजा अभी तक लगाया नहीं जा रहा है, और कितने लोग छुपे घर में गोलियां लिए बैठे हैं वो भी सोचने वाली चीज है। तो हालात ये है, माइनॉरिटी के साथ जो हो रहा है वो आप सब बेहतर तरीके से, अगर आप पेड मीडिया छोड़ के अगर इवन इंडिपेंडेंट मीडिया या जो सोशल एक्टिविस्ट है उनको देखेंगे तो आप बेहतर तरीके से जान पाएंगे कि यहाँ लोगों को मारना, लिंच करना, डिस्क्रिमिनेशन करना कितना आसान हो चुका है। एक आईएएस ऑफिसर को सिर्फ इस बेसिस पे एसआईटी में क्वारी बैठा दी जाती है कि उसने 8 साल पहले कभी एक मुसलमानों की फिगर में बयान दिया था। एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव पावर की यहाँ इंडिया में सबसे बड़ी जॉब होती है आईएएस, जहां ऐसे लोगों को लिंच करने की कगार पे लोग आ चुके हैं, जहां आपकी रिप्रेजेंटेशन जो है वो सिर्फ पॉलिटिकली इन्वॉल्व है, जहां आपकी नुमाइंदगी जो है वो आप पे फोकस नहीं कर रही है। उस कंडीशन में कहां तक हम ये सारी चीजें कर सकते हैं और कहां तक हमारा ये जो मुआशरा है ये जा रहा है, ये सोचने वाली बात है। होप के अलावा फिलहाल यहाँ कुछ नहीं है। जो लोग जमीन पे काम कर रहे हैं वो बेहतर तरीके से जानते हैं कि वी इवन ओनली बिलीव इन अल्लाह। अभी फिलहाल हमारे पास होप के अलावा कुछ नहीं है। जितना हम लोगों से हो सकता है इंडिविजुअली तरीके से, तो हम वही सब चीजें कर रहे हैं और वही सब चीजें करना चाह रहे हैं। बाकी आप लोगों से दुआओं की आरजू है, और जाकिर अली त्यागी जैसे लोग हैं वो आपको ज्यादा बेहतर तरीके से बता सकते हैं, क्योंकि इन लोगों ने भी बहुत सारे केसेस भी करे हैं जहां 20-20 साल से और 22-22 साल से लोग छूट के जेल से निकल के आते हैं और उनको बोला जाता है कि बाइज्जत बरी आप हो गए। 20 साल की जिंदगी आपने जेल में उनकी काट दी एक फॉल्स एलिगेशन में, और उसके बाद वो ज्यादातर 90% लोग माइनॉरिटी से बिलोंग करते हैं। और ये एक जो रिजीम है वो भी चल रही है, वो भी मैं आपको बता देता हूँ, जो इसके सिर्फ ओनली इन दिस गवर्नमेंट, दिस इज नॉट बीइंग डन नॉट ओनली इन दिस गवर्नमेंट। हम लोग बहुत पुराना झेल रहे हैं, हम लोग बहुत गुनाहों की सजा है शायद जो हमारी नस्लों पे उतारी जा रही है। किस बात का गुस्सा है, न जाने किस चीज की वजह है ये जो हमारे साथ हो रहा है। और हर तरह से हर तरफ से हमारे पास कुछ नहीं है। इवन एट द ग्राउंड लेवल वी ओनली हैव सम राइस एंड वी हैव द होल कॉलोनी जस्ट टू ईट। फिलहाल कंडीशन हकीकत में ये है। ये चीजें वो है जो आपके सामने समझ में आ जाती है, ये चीजें वो है जो आपके सामने सोशल मीडिया से सामने आ जाती है। अगर आप ग्राउंड पे उतर जाएंगे तो यकीन जानिए रातों की नींद उड़ेगी। और इस हिसाब से चीजें चल रही हैं कि आपको ना बता पाएंगे, और ना ही सोशल वेबिनार है शायद आप लोग इसे पब्लिश करें। तो इवन आई कांट से ऑल दीज थिंग्स ऑन दिस पर्टिकुलर इशू, जो हम चीजें फेस कर रहे हैं और ये जो सारी चीजें हो रही है, जो चीजें बोल रहा हूँ वो सारी चीजें ऑन रिकॉर्डेड है, इसीलिए सारी चीजें बोल पा रहा हूँ। जो रियलिटी में कुछ चीजें हैं वो तो इससे भी ज्यादा खराब है और दर्दनाक है। बाकी हेट स्पीच का आप देख ही रहे हैं कि ये सारा जो आपका टॉपिक है, हेट स्पीच इज नॉट जस्ट अ स्पीच, इट्स अ प्रोपेगेंडा, इट्स अ एजेंडा ऑफ अ पॉलिटिकल पार्टी जस्ट टू डिस्क्रिमिनेट। वो पोलराइजेशन करना चाह रहे हैं और वो उसका हथियार है हेट स्पीच। तो ये कहीं ना कहीं उस लेवल पे चीजें जा रही हैं कि 80-20 इंडिया इन अ पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी, अगर मैं बात करूं इन अ पर्टिकुलर सिनेरियो इंडिया के लेवल पे बात करूं, तो वो 80-20 का पोलराइजेशन इसी की तरह से कर रहे हैं। देयर इज नाइदर अ डेवलपमेंट, वी डिडंट अचीव marvelous thing in the last 5 years or 10 years. So this is the only key weapon कि आप डिस्क्रिमिनेट करें, पोलराइज करें और आगे की तरफ निकल जाएं। Yeah, thanks a lot. Any questions? I would like to answer. अगर आप कुछ पूछना चाहें तो।
आप मुझे ये बताएं कि हेट स्पीच से रिलेटेड कोई लॉ वगैरह इंडिया में मौजूद है जिसपे काम हो रहा है?
देखिए, हेट स्पीच को आईपीसी और हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में कहीं भी डिफाइन नहीं किया गया पर्टिकुलरली। लॉ कमीशन से कुछ सिनेरियोज निकले थे, उसको भी आप समझिए, जो लॉज हैं उनमें मैक्सिमम जो सजाएं हैं वो 2-2, 3-3 साल की हैं, 153 लगती है। अगर आप ये भी वेरी करती है, इफ यू बिलोंग टू अ पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटी और आप हेट स्पीच दे देते हैं तो आप पे सेडिशन भी लग जाता है, आप पे सब कुछ लग जाता है। यू विल बी बिहाइंड द बार्स फॉर मोर देन 10 years or 20 years. And if you are belongs to from a favorable country, that you will be out of the bar from within 12 hours. You must have an example, just like Maulana Kaleem Siddiqui, right now an example of Ashwani Upadhyay, जिनकी मैंने एफआईआर करी थी दिल्ली में और वो 12 घंटे के अंदर बाहर आ गए। They both all belongs to the hate speeches. Umar Khalid is also a victim of hate speech, and Ashwani Upadhyay is also a victim of hate speech. You both you can easily differentiate on behalf of the particular favorable community or against community what's going on.
Thank you so much. Now I will like to hand over to Hemant Das.
Hello there everyone, my name is Hemant Das and I am the part of the SARIM. Jamie, he is professor based in Mumbai. Currently he is the final year of his PhD in politics. He has done graffiti related to text exploitation in the past on the walls of Mumbai streets and covered by mainstream media for the same. For the past few years, he has been writing and tweeting very wisely on the areas of casteism, free speech like Hindutva, followed by postcards and interviews. He writes on Buddhism, economy, casteism, free speech, hate speech, and other contemporary issues on the platform like Medium, Youth Ki Awaaz, Actual, Anarchy, Redo, and The Quant. And he holds 22 peer-reviewed research paper officially. Presently, Jamie has detached from his former religion, Hinduism. Officially, presently, like Dr. Ambedkar, he preaches Buddhism, meditation, and follows the revolutionary path of enlightenment, caste, and its international relationships. Mr. Jamie, please share your thoughts and experiences with us.
Nice to connect with you all. And Heman, thank you for the introduction and glad to see you back again. Our last interview went really well. It's a case study for more controversial conversations on casteism because in India, we are not so democratic to talk about hate crimes, though hate crimes are done very openly, right? And I listened to previous eminent speakers, Michael sir and Zakir sir. I wish them all the best for their future on the wards in their struggle against fascism, which I think we are all facing. My Hindi is not so good, so please pardon me, guys, and not so well versed with the Urdu. But I would be simplifying my conversation in the next 8 minutes, and I will just stick to the core important highlights. The first thing is, if you look at the theme of the webinar, it's really important that the victimization of minorities in South Asia, followed by the crescendo in hate speech and how it has a consequence on minorities, is very important study. See, the first thing is we need to understand what drives people to do hate speech against the minorities. If you see the recent American Civil Society report, 2 years back, 40% of the content on social media is against Muslims, Dalits, tribals, and homosexual communities. And they are all minorities. In fact, women are also minorities in India. 3 years back, we saw a report that how women are also unsafe in India. And we see normalization of hate speech against minorities. So why is this happening? See, the first principle is to understand the inherent flaw of a democracy. Democracy is nothing but rule of the majority. And we do not have any constitution which in the current scenario where we can limit the power of the government intervention. That's why what Zakir sir was saying is also very important, that sedition law being applied against people who dissent is like a fashion now. And India has seen a case in sedition cases against minorities and their free speech in a very fastest manner. And this is a very bad trend because it has implications on minorities. It has implications on our constitution as well as the democratic culture. Now, in the past 7 years, there is hate crimes against minorities increasing by 300%. This is a very dangerous trend. I don't see United Nations talking about it. I don't see European Union talking about it. They have all those so-called committees talking about human rights. In fact, they have their own Islamophobic problems in their own countries, which they have not able to address. So I don't believe that we require international validation, because casteism is now, not just a national problem, it is also an international problem. I'll tell you how. We have seen recently the cases of Cisco. We have seen the cases of New Jersey in US, where, people of upper caste have normalized caste slurs or, hate speech against minorities there. Dr. Ambedkar was of the view that wherever an upper caste or an oppressor caste would travel, casteism would get exported along. And that is what we are seeing in this time. So sticking to this, particular keyword, that is hate speech, which I think we should talk about. I think the hate speech is an outcome of hate thinking. So if you look at our socialization, the quality of socialization, we look at the quality of TV news, especially Hindi, it has the largest outreach in India. And then followed by the English channel, it's almost like a Godi media, which is a sarcastic, slur taken at the current prime minister. It really tells about normalization of hate speech. We saw during the initial stages of COVID pandemic that how Muslims were, especially in Indian media sphere, were, maligned. You see the kind of posters, the kind of, cartoons, the kind of memes that were completely with impunity flowing on social media. We have all those Atrocities Act, and it took like literally 4 decades for India to realize Atrocities Act. And what is Atrocities Act? It basically registers the crimes against minorities, especially SC, ST community. And, even 10 years back, Dr. Manmohan Singh was shocked looking at the numbers of, conviction rate. The conviction offenses are more than the conviction rate, and this is really a dangerous trend. So it's like Dalits are really in India at the mercy of themselves. It says so. You check the 2019 National Crime Registry Bureau, all those data, NCRB data of 2019, and recently 2020 NCRB data was out. It shows a systematic inflation, of hate crimes against SC, ST, and including women. And we see this Dalit phobia, we see the hatred for, people of lower caste in India, because it's an organized graded inequity. And this has been very conventional. In the last YouTube video with Hemant, I had made this clear in depth about the technical dynamics of casteism at play. It's very important. And secondly, at the same time, it's very important that we try to smash this out, because it's a very intersectional problem between caste and gender, between caste and identity. And it's a problem which really requires a core attention. And it is naturally coinciding with the rise of Hindutva in last 7 years. There is a data about it. It's not just I am out here speaking out of fiction, but it is important that there is, the principles that Dr. Ambedkar talked about, educating, organizing, and agitating, are very important for the minorities to unite, to smash the patriarchy, to smash Islamophobia, to smash hatred for Dalits, tribals, or Adivasis, or even homosexual communities. Because when we talk about minorities, we cannot selectively fight oppression. It has to be objectively fought because it is intersectional problem, and it is a problem that is making India an authoritarian state completely with impunity. I would like to address questions if there is at the end of the webinar, but my last few liners would be that when we look at casteism, just don't look at it from the point of view of affirmative action, because most of the casteist slurs start with this. I think this is a very dangerous precedent which we should completely unfollow, because if social grade inequity follows, social justice will naturally follow for those who want to cope up and see they may. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy, for sharing your perspectives on contemporary India as well as your personal experience there. Thank you very much. Now it's time to ask some questions. Participant, you can ask now.
I am Prokobil. I have a question with Mr. Jamie. Sir, I have a question. There is no cure for hate speech, but there is a way to stand up against it. What are the available techniques, instruments, and tactics to deal with these challenges, especially in terms of solution space?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll systematically take one by one if in case there are multiple questions. The first thing is, as I said a few minutes back, that the hate speech is stemming from the hate culture. The hate culture is incentivized by how we are socialized with hatred. Parents and the schooling system have a very bigger responsibility to downsize, hate speech, because I think hatred is first taught in our premises. How do we learn to hate? That's a very important question that we should ask, because we have to apply some deductionist approach in smashing down this particular issue. Secondly, in the Indian context, as I given the data that there is a crescendo of hate speech or normalization of casteist slurs, the term B word, the N word is openly used in India with impunity. As we see the caste-based occupations like manual scavenging, which still continues to persist, and Uttar Pradesh having the highest number of manual scavenging cases, which still continues in 21st century, it's highly degrading. And the kind of the term which is used for a particular community like Dalits, especially on social media, it's something very disturbing. So the government has provided Atrocities Act since 1989. It took like literally 4 decades where you can register your complaints against this particular act if you see hate speech online, if you see hate speech offline, And recently, International Dalit Solidarity Network, if you see the report of caste hate speech published this year, 2021, where they have also given 3 to 4 pages of solutions, which also talks about education, which also talks about making the legal outreach and advocacy, kind of easily accessible for the Dalit community. Because in India, it is still, the legal resources have not easily trickled down. And that is why we see normalization of hate speech against Dalits with impunity. Third, I believe that at the same time, it's important that we raise awareness, not just through official or conventional means like parenting or maybe education sector, but also at the same time, it's important that we are, considering the impact on mental health when it comes to using caste slurs, because mental health in India is still a stigma, despite India being the most overpopulated country where talking about sex and homosexuality is still a taboo. Talking about mental health is another dilemma. And that's why, we may use certain words for oppressed communities, but it doesn't make sense at all because it is very inhuman to do so. And people who do the hate speech around, they are justifying it is as freedom of speech. I think you cannot call an apple as an orange. There is a big distinction between both. So similarly, hate speech cannot be confused with freedom of speech in the first place. And people who defend this position are basically belonging to the upper caste.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
to all the speakers and participants. To conclude this online session, I would like to invite Dr. Khurram, the Director of South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. Dr. Khurram, you can proceed now. Thank you.
Thank you, Heman. I would like to thank the honorable speakers, Dr. Sabir Michael, Mr. Ali Zadi, Mr. Zakir Ali Tyagi, and Mr. Jamin on behalf of the entire institute for presenting their vital work and expressing their observation and opinion with us today. I would want to give a brief overview of the speeches we have heard, followed by my closing remarks. So Dr. Sabir Michael stated that non-dominated minorities in India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka face not only socio-economic and cultural problems, but also political and professional problems that similar of human rights violation faced by minorities communities in South Asia are common. According to Mr. Zakir Ali, UAPA has shown to be a useful weapon for targeting activists, religious and ethnic minorities, as well as instilling terror in the general public in order to provide a reason for an authoritarian regime to act with impunity. Despite the fact that the UAPA has been in effect since 1967, India's parliament just included a separate provision to criminalize terrorist act in 2004. The law was changed again in 2019, allowing the government to label anyone as terrorist. Previously, the government could only identify groups as terrorists, not the individuals. And now, hundreds of journalists, activists, and students have been arrested under UAPA in recent years. The majority of them are Muslims or the supporters of Muslims, prompting worldwide condemnation of the law. According to Mr. Jamin, lynching of India's minorities have increased dramatically in the last 5 years. Hundreds more individuals have been hurt in attacks inspired by religion, and the majority of those killed are Muslims, the country's largest religious minority. They make up roughly 15% of India's population of 1.3 billion people. And Hindu from lower caste and Christians are among the other casualties. According to Ali Zadi, hate and disinformation efforts against Muslims in India have risen in the last 3 years. And when a Muslim leader stated anything critical of Islam, the Indian government imprisoned him under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, that is UAPA, for hate speech. Whereas in India's capital, anti-Muslim chants have been heard. He further argued that discrimination against Muslims has occurred in a variety of settings, including work, education, and housing. Many people face obstacles in their quest for political power and riches, as well as a lack of access to healthcare and essential amenities. Furthermore, despite the constitutional safeguards, individuals frequently struggle to obtain justice after being subjected to prejudice. So here I would like to conclude. Hate speech and incitement to hatred have become more common in South Asia, with severe consequences for minorities. Majority groups in the region have long worked to propagate and reinforce stereotypes and prejudice towards minorities, both explicitly, for example, through altered school textbooks, and covertly, for example, through open use of hateful words, especially by the senior leaders. To this purpose, new opportunities given by digital technology, particularly television and social media platforms, have been successfully used. These are frequently coordinated campaigns that help to rationalize or encourage discrimination, intolerance, and violence towards minorities. The increase of internet use, often through mobile phones, has created a new instrument to encourage and coordinated hatred and bloodshed in an area plagued with historical socio-economic tensions. We can see in Bangladesh, people have purposefully engaged in internet campaigns resulting in large-scale fatal violence against Hindus and Buddhists during the previous decade. Hindu nationalists in India have targeted religious minorities and Hindu low-caste populations. Hate speech, which usually demonizes Muslims as pro-Pakistani or terrorist supporters, is linked to violence against Muslims in particular. And rumors that Muslims were distributing COVID-19 on purpose circulated across the country via Facebook and social media in early 2020, leading to an increase in assaults on Muslims across the country, often supported by BJP and RSS sympathizers and officials. Social media has been used by Sinhalese Buddhist extremist organization in Sri Lanka to propagate Islamophobia and instigate violence. Anti-Muslim riots erupted in Kandy and Nugombo in 2018 and 19 as a result of the propagation of misinformation and hate speech on Facebook in the aftermath of the Easter bombing. False allegation that Muslims were sterilizing Sinhalese women were part of this internet effort. And during the COVID-19 period, the same organizations promoted hate speech around the topic of Muslim remains being cremated. In the run-up to 2020 election in Burma, Buddhist extremist political parties, candidates, and supporters use social media to spread hate speech against religious minorities. During the campaign, Muslim candidates were targeted for online insults and threats, and political parties who fielded Muslim candidates were accused of not safeguarding race and religion. One Muslim candidate was wrongly accused of wanting Arabic to be taught in Burma's school, according to the disinformation. So these acts of internet instigated violence in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Burma emphasize two essential features of regional online hate speech. First, hate speech is a political issue. Hate speech and identity-based violence are perpetrated, encouraged, and benefited by religious, political, and military elites in every country. Even when intergroup enmity arises naturally, elites frequently use these divisive feelings for their own gain rather than attempting to settle the conflict. Political campaigns have become more characterized by hate speech and communally charged rhetoric. Anti-Pakistan rhetoric from the BJP and Prime Minister Modi caused in anti-Muslim and anti-Kashmiri violence during the India's general election in 2019. To mobilize supporters, Burmese political leaders frequently use hate speech. During election campaigns, the imagined threat of religious minorities is being used to energize the Buddhist majority. Outside of election cycles, hate speech and violence also shape politics. Religious elites in Bangladesh, many of whom are linked with opposition parties, have exploited deceiving allegations in order to incite the interreligious conflict. Political figures from Bangladesh Major's party are often said to to have joined the mob in some situations, including the anti-Buddhist riot of Cox's Bazar. Politicians in Sri Lanka have exploited an anti-Muslim rhetoric to deflect attention away from the country's economic woes. The Rajapaksa government has targeted Muslims with a planned ban on the burqa in the wake of the recent sugar import crisis that implicated high-level government officials in wrongdoings. Secondly, hate speech and violence in South Asia target minority populations, cleaving on to historically ingrained conflict mechanisms. Depending on their demographic position in the country, Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists are the victim of this hate speech and violence. Several governments in South Asia have strengthened their powers to ban online expression in response to these incidents. Bangladesh Digital Security Act 2018 and Burma's Telecommunication Act 2013, for examples, establish a regulatory authority apparently aimed at curbing the hate speech and, of course, the disinformation. But governments, on the other hand, have been accused of exploiting these sometimes vaguely written rules to target the political opponents and suppress dissent, according to critics. Hate speech is successful at mobilizing people in the region, and hate speech directed at minorities is common. These two forces combine to produce a powerful disincentive for politicians to regulate hate speech. Therefore, what alternate ways may work in this environment with technological and socio-political hurdles to regulating hate speech, and when governments are prone to overreach? Citizen-centered and civil society-led initiatives have proven to be a vital complement to new policies around the world. Citizens are being taught how to detect false information and hate speech through digital literacy courses. Online lies that might lead to violence are examined, reported, and refuted by fact-checking organizations. Moreover, journalists are also utilizing their power to expose politicians who distribute false information for political benefit. So with more people having access to the internet in South Asia, there will certainly be more hate speech, more fake news, and more rumors that lead to real world violence. The most vulnerable group will be minorities, of course, but the detrimental repercussions of this new reality will spread across communities. The response to this challenge should be both top-down and bottom-up. Governments and technology firms must collaborate to govern the hateful internet spaces. However, people and civil society groups play an important role in preventing hate speech from spreading into social conflict and, in the best case scenario, preventing it from occurring in the first place. I think a regional level platform can also be helpful, and the United Nations can also play a key role in controlling the menace of hate speech. Thank you everyone for joining us today. May God bless us all.